that goes something like this. Life, soul, art, and business with Leonie Dawson and sometimes Grant Andrew. Right? Amazing.
That's amazing. You should record that tonight, now.
Just it. I'll just put a little jingle on that. Hey, you might need to put headphones. Put your headphones on. I can hear myself.
So, hello everyone to the inaugural Life, Soul, Art and Business podcast with Leonie Dawson and sometimes Grant Andrew. And today it's inaugural because the sometimes Grant Andrew is here with us. Say hello, Grant Andrew.
It's one of those times.
It is one of those sometimes. So I want to do these podcasts so they're pretty relaxed, pretty chilled out, and just give you, I don't know, whatever's on my mind, whatever I'm thinking about, life, soul, art, and business. It's weird that I've called it that when that's exactly what I want to fucking talk about. For those of you who don't know moi, I don't know how you got here, but I'm very, very excited that you're here. I want to give you a big cuddle. If that doesn't feel inappropriate to your boundaries, I probably will still hug you anyway. I apologize for that in advance. It's just how I'm wired. So sorry. But not really. I'm not really that sorry because I have hugged like 300 people in one day. It was a competition at work. It was a competition that I invented myself. I should elaborate upon that. I did invent it myself and then just saw how many people I could hug in one day. So I'm one of those people. So I am an entrepreneur and the owner of a 7-figure company, and we are self-publishers. We run the Shining Biz and Life Academy online, and the sometimes Grant Andrew is my wily chief operations officer and my terrible twin. And so I thought it'd be fun to bring him in on these conversations because he's a little bit like slightly more left brain than me. Slightly.
Which is a frightening world. When I'm more left brain than someone.
That's right. Because it's like,
it's like an alternate universe or something.
Yeah, right. However, we do pretty good on the left brain front. You know, we do all right. We do all right on the left brain front. So today I thought it would be interesting to interview Grant and ask him some questions about what it's like. What's different about working for me in my company than his experience in other companies? So Grant, if you wanted to like share your past like work experience, probably the concise version because you have been around for about 3,000 years and done 4,000 jobs in that time. 4,500.
Yeah. So I have worked in corporate environments and I have been an entrepreneur, am an entrepreneur. There's not a lot of this company that is not entrepreneurial, so still entrepreneurializing away here, but have worked on the sort of web dev agency side and have worked in a lot of different environments, small businesses, large corporate environments, and kind of everything in the middle. So yeah, this is interesting. I also think it's interesting as this company is not maturing by any means. We wouldn't want to use that word, but you know, it's kind of a downer. It's not like we say it's like wine, but it's not really like wine, right? That's just something we say. No one young is like, I can hardly wait to get like old wine. That's just what people who are old say. So the you know, as you know, so there's sort of there's a progression, I think, and as you go through that progression and you grow, things do become more normalized in some ways, which you know, we work with this, I think, on a pretty regular basis, trying to decide like which line we're sort of working through. You know, are we a you almost reach this point where you're sort of schizophrenic. Are you a little company that's trying to do big things? Are you a big company that's trying to do big things? And where are you on that continuum? And as depending on how you see yourself and where you want to go, then it in some ways influences your actions.
Mm. So what would you say is the most different? Like what are the pieces in this company that are most different from your past work experiences?
Well, I think, and in some ways different and the same than other things I've done, but a piece that's challenging is, we are 100% remote, and we're not sort of, we're not remote because we want to be, and we just didn't like want to come into the office this morning. We just like called in and said, hey, I'm going to work from home today. I mean, we have to be remote. We are remote because we want to be, but we also have to be remote. It's sort of enforced. So, if I hurried, I could be in Australia in like 2 days from now, but yesterday or something. I can't quite figure that out. But we got even the team in the U.S. here, we're geographically dispersed, and so it's sort of enforced remote work in a way that even when you have to solve challenging puzzles, you have to do it remotely. So that makes things different. And I think some people work with a small team remotely, or some people, they got a few contractors that work remotely. We're 100% remote. So that's one thing that makes things different. I think we also serve a really unique tribe. And to me, I would say we're very clearly a hero brand, or as maybe more appropriately, a Shiro brand. And you are the brand, and that brand has attracted a number of people that are super cool and super energetic and bring a lot of excitement and just unique interaction into this community. And so what that does is sort of sets a baseline. So we're remote, and we are a brand that's based primarily on an individual. And that individual has a magnetism to these other people, and so there's kind of like, as a service organization, we're trying to work with that as a baseline. And so in a lot of companies, you might have, I've worked in everything from very clear sort of commoditized, financial services stuff where you're just selling to big, huge chunks of the population. Well, we're selling to what feels like a big tribe. It's pretty cool. There's quite a few people listening, but it's really a pretty small slice, and it's a very unique slice. And I think we all really appreciate that. That's part of the value of being a part of this company. But it does kind of set the ground that we're sort of running things through that filter, as opposed to like everybody who drinks Coke would also like our product. Some people who drink Coke.
I love full fat Coke. I am a huge fan of full fat Coke.
So it changes kind of what you're filtering for and how you're looking at things, and I think also then how we're judged as a company and as a team by the tribe that we serve is unique as well, right? So in some ways that might be a little bit tighter because people look at the work that we do and that our team does as an extension of Leonie. And so at some level, if we overbill somebody, they don't say, those terrible people at the, cell phone company overbilled me. They think Leonie overbilled me. This is horrible. So you have that aspect, and then you also have places where people are, kind of go the other way, and they give us a lot of latitude that, maybe in a typical sort of customer company relationship you wouldn't have. So it's a little bit different there as well.
Yeah, I think people, when things go wonky, like for example the workbooks, for the most part, our tribes are really supportive. They understood that we were like in a really fucking difficult position, and that that we were doing everything we could to fix it, and they trusted us, and it was very heartwarming to see. Especially we're all working so crazy hard and so passionate about getting it fixed, and it was really nice to be supported by our tribe.
Well, and that's one of those places, I think, once again with Coke, people just go to Pepsi. I mean, it's just you would just say like, you know what, there's another way to do this. I don't actually, but in reality, this is a very loyal tribe, and there's a very deep set of relationships here, and so people hung in and kind of cut us some slack and were patient in places that I think you may not see that in every type of business. So the other side of that is then because there is that really deep relationship, and people look at it as a personal relationship, then as a business processes. I mean, we're constantly looking at how do we behave that way. How do we actually build, at a generic level? How do we build a company? But at a process level, at a, if there's a question, a customer service process, a business question, how do we handle it in a way that continues to feel that way, right? Whether you would describe it as a, maybe in a mom and pop kind of way. I mean, people want to do business with a person. They don't want to do business with something that's faceless. So, how do we extend that brand in a way that's really respectful and is it gives that same sort of trust and investment that people have made in us. How do we give that back and continue that cycle and not sort of? I think a lot of times brands kind of, it's easy to want to engender that and then sort of take it back out of the marketplace, to say like, we want you to love us, we want you to care about our products. When, oh, it broke? Well, it's 2 days past the warranty. So, now we're going to kind of like, you could buy another one. We hope you do, but it's like, how do we not behave that way? So how do we actually build something that has the same kind of heart and compassion and tries to really do things in a way that's very transparent and very upright, and those decisions, while you can say all that stuff, and every business out there has some sort of an ethical, this is how we do business, but it really actually comes to play in these little tiny places, these decisions on a daily basis of how you're going to actually handle things in the trenches, in customer service, in how you're building business automation and all of that. That's actually where that stuff happens. So the fact they have an ethical compass somewhere else is like, well, yeah, that's in a different office. Here is where we kind of figure out how to screw people. And I think in LDI, we're actually trying to figure out how do we enhance and extend that generosity through all of these processes, right? Like, not to say, hey, we were like really nice people when it was Leonie in a back room shoving stuff in an envelope, but now that we have automation, that just automatically means we're just going to like turn into assholes that are like automated, like no, how do we actually automate generosity? How do we automate compassion? How do we automate doing the right thing and keep that in our minds as we're going through kind of daily work?
Totally. And how do we engender the spirit of love and joy and connection? Because our tribe is our friends. And that's not to say that we do it in a boundaryless way. I'm not a doormat, and the company's not a doormat. We don't accept abuse, and we also ensure that all of our customers and clients are responsible for themselves and do what they need to do. So it's kind of like walking that balance of how can we live in this world according to our spiritual truths. I mean, because of course, boundaries are a spiritual truth as well, and having self-respect and really clearly communicating what is right for the space that you're sculpting, what's right for what energy do we want to create in the academy, because we want it to be a utopia of love and respect. And in order for us to do that, sometimes that means we need to make really difficult decisions, like remove people from that community because they're not actually able to behave in a way that engenders that essence.
Right. So right. It isn't. And I would say another boundary is it does take money to do this. So we can't do it for free. We can't give it away. And in fact, the more that we embody that, the more flexibility we have to do things well, right? I mean, that's one of the places I think you see people sort of not price appropriately and then not actually have the money to do the right thing for the people that they're trying to serve. There's just no way. If you just said, well, this is a a $50 task, or a 50 stone task, or whatever, however you're defining value. If you said but I'll do it for you for 25. I mean, that's not going to last forever. So either that's an introductory special, or it is it's a recipe for disaster. And so, as we've approached things, some of the places that I've recognized that things are different is that, on one hand, we do sort of hold these boundaries, and on the other hand, we do it with some level of transparency. So we try not to use gimmicks. We try not to play some of the games that you see people, especially in this space. I mean, internet marketing and info marketing is, there's been some great world-changing kind of ideas that have come through some of these channels, but there's also been just a lot of sort of gimmicks and goofiness that sometimes I look at, and I've worked on campaigns where I can't believe people actually think this is working, that you've landed on the page, and since you've been here, 20 books have been sold, and there's only 2 left, but if you hit reload, you'll find out that there's 35 books left. It just doesn't quite add up, and I really appreciate that we don't play those kinds of games. We try to create a great product. We try to market that product in a way that certainly shows it in a good light, but also just tells what it is. This is what it is. This is what the this year's workbook looks like. This is what the new academy looks like. This is what we have to offer, and we truly believe that we've put the best ideas and the best energy and the best thinking and the best production into those things, in whatever means that's coming to you. And we're going to ask you for a fair price for it, and not play games, and not say, hey, today, but tomorrow it'll be a better deal, and if you come back, there's some sort of funniness there. Which I just appreciate, because I think, once again, that's like a wholesome exchange of energy on both sides that says, hey, we're going to ask you to support us. We can't do this without some kind of financial flow, but we're also not going to take advantage of that, or take advantage of people in a way that preys on what they don't understand, or fear that they're going to miss out on something. I mean, if we're going to close a sale, we close the sale. It's not, we're not going to play with this, oh, hey, we left it open an extra day just to see if we could get some more money.
Yeah, and I've throughout my company's history, like, for example, I remember being in a forum after, and I'd increased the price of the academy, and somebody in this forum that I was a part of said to me, oh, I used to be in at $99 a year, and now your prices rise to $497. That was over the space of quite a few years. We'd increased a couple of times as we'd put in new products, and increased the level of value and worth that was in the academy. And she said, so, can you just let me back in at that price? And I said, no, I can't, because my word is gold. And when I say to people, this is actually the last opportunity for you to invest at this rate, then I need to uphold that everywhere I go. And she said, but nobody will know. It'll just be you and me and all of these people in this forum that will know. And she was really trying to pressure me into doing it. And I said, no, I can't. You need to accept no is no. And I'm not doing it to spite you. I'm doing it because my people need to trust me. And wherever I go, people have to know that when I say something, I'm not saying it to be salesy. I'm saying it because that's how things are going to be, and that's how that boundary is upheld. I think it takes a lot of commitment and strength to stay true to what you say you're going to do, and not bow out because somebody wants you to, or you get pressure, or you feel like you want to for money. I think it's really important to do simple marketing. Well, that's what I like anyway. I just prefer simple marketing. I don't want to charge really huge prices. It's not my, I could if I wanted to, I've got associates who charge $30,000 a year for the same content that I share, well, even less, that I share in the academy. And I'm not going to go to anywhere near those levels, because that's not the people that I particularly want to serve, and that doesn't fill me with a great amount of joy. I just want to be able to create and then share it with the world as generously as I can.
Well, and I think that creates a great space in our mastermind group that is sort of the beginner's mind, in a lot of cases, you have a fresh flow of people that are, because here's the reality. People are not going to spend 30 grand on a gamble. Maybe I want to start a business, or I have a little business and I want to see it grow. I think what I probably need to do is invest 30 grand in some coaching and see if this is going to go somewhere. But they will invest 497 in themselves and in their idea to see if they can make it work. And those moments when somebody pops in and says, hey, this is amazing. 2 weeks ago, I started this course. It said to do X, Y, and Z. I've done X, Y, and Z, and here's the results. I think it keeps everybody kind of fresh to that idea of, hey, you do the work. There's results that come out of it. Your results are related to your investment more than they're related to some sort of magic thing that has to happen in the broader world. You might have to change, you might have to grow, you might have to learn something, do something differently, but it keeps people in that spot instead of creating a culture that's at this level that is unattainable for a lot of those people, but also I think the emphasis changes in those programs, and by necessity, but it also I just love watching people sort of discover their possibility on a regular basis. I mean, that's really exciting.
And it's so nice when you see people implementing. I think that's the greatest struggle of teaching, really, from my end, is like I've in the academy, I just pour out everything that I know. Everything that I've done to double my business, everything that I've done to, be happy within myself, all of the secrets of adulthood, basically, of life and business. And I feel frustrated when people aren't taking advantage of that. It's like, well, mate, you have to implement yourself. Like, to learn that is a skill of its own, and it's a lifelong skill. Like, how you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So, how can I get people to see, one, that the academy is there for them if they do decide to invest, and two, when they do invest, like, how to put it into action and how to implement it, because all of the courses under the sun won't do shit when they're piled in some folder or password protected somewhere if you're not actually implementing them, because implementing them and doing the work is where the gold is found.
Right. Well, and I think that's very true for that's true for everything. I think in some ways maybe that's a little bit of a risk of part of this business model, because I think at 30 grand you probably trust the material and you doubt yourself, and I think at 497 it's like, maybe it just wasn't that good. You're tempted to almost doubt. You're tempted to almost doubt, like, the material must have sucked, because I'm not this bad. Come on, Instead of recognizing the people who get it are like, you know what? I paid $497 3 weeks ago, and I took one of these courses, and I've done a third of it, and I already see the results. I see it working. I realize it actually is on my shoulders, right? Yeah. But at 30 grand, you're like, I spent all this money, but I guess I just must not have understood something. There must have just been some piece there that I just didn't fully get, and that's why this hasn't worked out like I hoped. And I think here it's almost like backwards, Yeah,
it's so true. Actually, I hired a coach for $30,000 quite a few years ago. Would I recommend it to everyone? I don't think I would. But I learned a lot from it, though. But one of the things that she said to me was, if I'd only charged you $300 for this year instead of $30,000, how much would you actually really listen to what I tell you to do? And I'd go, a bit. And she said, how committed would you be to turning up to calls if I was only charging $300 a year? And I'm like, probably not that much, because at that point I was waking up at 5 a.m. to get on calls with her. And for $30,000 a year, I was like, well, I'm gonna fucking suck like every single piece of this investment out. I guess it's like the dichotomy here is that I don't want to charge $30,000, but how do I get people to actually pay attention and invest in and actually implement that information as though it was $30,000, because fucking trust me, it is. Like, it's fucking worth that amount if you fucking implement it.
Well, and that's the challenge, right? Is that at some level it's sort of I think the people who do really well are ready. They jump in and they just need the next step. They just need some help understanding where they are and what they need to do to be successful. And you know, you see people who say, hey, you know, I read through it and I realized I don't even really have an idea. And they go get an idea and they come back with an idea and they say, okay, now I have an idea. Now what do I do with my idea? They plug it back into the formula and say, great, okay, now let me go execute on that idea. And so I think that whole piece is just very interesting to watch people and recognize, you know, and our goal is to continue to add value to that, to make it an even crazier deal. You know, that there's a lot of information, but ultimately a piece that really changes, I think, is that people begin to understand how to work in these ways, how to work in this environment. They learn more about themselves and what works for them. And, you know, it isn't necessarily about 100% specificity about exactly, it's about doing something. And that's why it works is, you know, the reality is you don't have to be right all the time. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be moving. And most people who are moving and taking 50% of the right actions, 20% of the right actions are successful. You know, it's the people who aren't moving, who aren't doing anything, who aren't changing. And so I think in that way, you know, another difference for me in terms of this work is that, you know, really at some level we're doing group coaching. We're basically a group coaching company. We're taking coaching ideas, turning them into products, and actually helping people be successful. And that's different than working at a product company where you build something that people use and they pay you for it, or a you know, a services company where you do some things and people, you know, have you do things for them and they pay you for it. And so, you know, it creates a little bit of a difference here. Is that really, you know, and we interact with people, but we don't interact with people as directly. They're interacting with some of this content and some of the material, and so our job is really to create great content and to continue to enhance and sort of focus that in ways that we think people are asking for based on the, you know, the feedback that we're getting from the community. So it's definitely a more exciting, interactive kind of experience because we, you know, we really have an opportunity to do right by people on so many levels. And you know, from just basic business transaction all the way up to how do we listen to and learn from and learn for other people and what they need, and find ways to put that out in this community in a way that, you know, is understandable and can sort of be consumed by the people who are, you know, chosen to be a part of it.
It's like being the guinea pigs, the test and the test dummies of what works in life and business. Really, I feel like, you know, whenever I go through anything, whether it's a challenge in business or a challenge in life, it widens me and deepens me and makes me smarter. And a part of me, even when it's the worst thing in the world to go through, a part of me is secretly delighted that I'm going to be able to come back and be able to share it with other people in case they're going through the same thing, and need to know that they're not alone through that, or need to find, you know, any insights that I found in the mud, you know.
Well, and you get pressed down into it far enough, you're bound to find something.
Yes, the withering, dying. Yeah.
Not that we would ever stay in the mud for any longer than is necessary, wallowing about, but.
Correct. But, you know, I do think it's useful to still say this really sucks when you're wallowing. I was talking about on Periscope yesterday, actually, about how I've kind of come to understand that it's really, really, really good and healthy to actually just say where you are instead of always pushing for the positive side. Because I was the person where, like, you go, how are you? I'd be like, fabulous, no matter how I was feeling. And I think there's a beauty to that. But I also think there's some way I can go, you know what, I'm feeling really fabulous on this part, and then there's this part inside me that's quaking in my boots. Like, that would be beautiful too.
Well, and I think if you're somebody who's not doing fabulous, having the sense that everybody around you is doing fabulous is actually a really lonely spot to be in. And I think that when people are willing to speak their truth about where they really are, and I think it's the sort of the Stockdale paradox, that you're that Jim Collins talks about, that you're sort of on one hand able to look at the the brutal facts of reality, and on the other hand able to still be optimistic, and hold both of those and say, I'm not going to run away from the fact that I'm challenged and that some of this is really hard, or that I'm in a spot that I wouldn't have chosen to be in, but I'm also going to hold on to optimism through this, and hold on to the confidence that I have in my past experiences and the fact that I've gotten through worse, or maybe I haven't gotten through worse. I mean, maybe this is the worst thing ever, but I have continued to conquer and continued to prevail even under trying times, and I expect that that's going to be the outcome here. I think for somebody who's in that spot of saying, man, I don't know what to do, this is really hard, I don't think this is fun, this isn't what I set out for, if nobody's ever willing to say, yeah, you're right, it sucks, then you're sort of like, I must just be an idiot. I'm so far out of the money here that I can't even play this game. And I think that people really appreciate that honesty that that is part of what you share, because I think that people understand then that, yeah, there's some great stuff in your life, and there's been some hard work, and there's been some hard times, and in some places those have brought you to a beautiful place, and in some places there's still work to do, and ultimately we're all still human. We're waking up in the morning and we have our struggles, and that's the beautiful part of it. That doesn't change just because your business changes. In some ways, some of those struggles can become more acute as we grow in business, because there's more to do, and the winds change, and things are a little bit different than when we started out.
There's more on the line.
There's definitely more on the line. So how you maintain that through sort of what growth does that take? I think if you had like a little tiny boat and you were trying to put up a sail, your first thing would be like, how can I get like the biggest sail possible? And then you'd get like some wind in that sail, and then your second thought would be, dang, the mast is just going to break off, because basically I've like got a bigger sail than I have like wood for a mast. And there's just this game that you just play all the way through, right? That then you're like, well, okay, so the next time we go to shore, we get this massive piece of wood, that's a tree or a telephone pole or something, and then you're like, well, you get that going, and you're like, well, it turns out that the boat itself just doesn't have the structural integrity to like bolt that to the floor, so then you need like more floor, and you're basically building like some massive boat. I won't say the Titanic, but you're building some massive sort of boat, but as an entrepreneur, like, you don't have the luxury of just rolling in and like buying the boat. You have to build it. And so what happens is like you keep going, and then you build the whole floor out, and you've like reinforced everything, and then it turns out that sail, which was awesome 3 boats ago, is now like this little tiny sheet in the wind, and you're like, well, now I need a bigger sail. You get a bigger sail, and they're like, dang, the mast is just not strong enough. So there's just this, that at some level, on one hand you could say, I always have a problem, and on the other hand you would say, the problem is always different because I'm growing and I'm changing and I'm actually like succeeding. So I had this problem with the sail, and I upgraded the mast, and for a little while it was good, and then I needed to upgrade the floor, and I kept responding and doing all this stuff. That's the journey. That's the whole thing right there. There's no way to like you can't get those opportunities, you can't get the highs out of that without dealing with the challenges that come with it. There is no like deal.
It's true. And like the different parts of the business, like you upgrade the team, and then the team comes with its own like challenges of learning how to like manage that and how to get everyone working beautifully together. And then you want to get cash flow working and make sure that your fiscal management is working beautifully. You want to get your marketing working to another level. You want to make sure that all your processes and all like having a standard operating procedures is working. And there's bits in every single part that needs fixing, like your tech infrastructure, your like we use Infusionsoft, and that's constantly like in tweak. And so it's like all of these things, and we're here, okay, which is the bit that's holding the company back now? What needs revitalizing, and in order to shift and shape the boat as you continue sailing. And the thing is, like, you and me, Grant, have both joked about how nice it would be just like to take a year off and go do an MBA, you know, get a Master's of Business Administration. We don't have the time for that. We have to build the boat as we're fucking sailing.
Yeah. And at some level, in the midst of all of that is kind of your own capacity for holding space and holding vision, and on the darkest nights holding hope for, you know, the little vessel that is now, you know, 100 times better than it was when you stepped off into the water the first time. But that means just now that you're in the midst of, you know, a massive ocean, and you're subject to huge storms and, you know, whales popping out of the water, and, you know, all sorts of things that just like back in the bay, you just never even, you know, you could see the bottom all the time, you know, and if it was stormy, you went home, and, you know, like there's this whole different thing. And I think one of the best quotes from Steve Jobs is that, you know, all boats leak, and Apple is a boat with a hole in the bottom of it, and my job is to make sure the boat is pointed in the right direction. That you know, that as a leader in that kind of an environment, there's only so much hole patching you can do. Because let's say that you abandon sailing for a moment and you just say, well, we have to patch all these holes. You patch all the holes, you're still in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of a storm. Now you're going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And so it's this sort of game of, on one hand, yeah, you have to patch holes or you would die. But on the other hand, you can't only patch holes or you die. So, you know, like there, you know, so really when it comes down to it, a business is ultimately a person who's trying to you know, effectively get where you need to go, you know. So there's no way around it being a person and having that person's weaknesses, strengths, you know, emotional highs and lows, all of that stuff telegraph into that whole business. And I mean, how many books have been written about Steve Jobs? Apple's a huge company.
Yeah.
That's how forceful Steve was, right? Was that ability to, you know, his emotional highs and lows, his strengths, his weaknesses, all of that telegraphed all the way through that company, through a society.
And to still create something that has lasting good impact on the world. That is a beautiful thing. What a miracle.
Right. I mean, it's life-changing for myriads of people. So.
So we're different in some ways. How are we the same? We kind of just answered that, I guess. We're all boats.
So, do you mean that in a? Do you mean that in a business way, or do you mean that in a like as individuals, or how do you mean the question?
Oh, so like at the beginning of this Le podcast, I asked you how working for this company was different from working for other companies. So how, and I think we've kind of answered it already with the boats analogy, but is there any other ways that we're the same as other companies?
I think as you grow as a business, you become more like other companies. You know, so if you think about a stock market, the stock market has the ability to take all kinds of different variables and reduce all of that to one number, share price, and then exchange that number in all kinds of different ways, because at some level of size, it doesn't matter what Disney does versus what Apple does versus what, you know, a HP does. You know, like those are all in very different sectors, but ultimately they make money, and however they make, whatever that mechanism is, it becomes a question of how well they can do that, how well they can harness their resources, how well they can connect with a market, and so when you start out, it's very, very individualized, And as you grow, it's less that way, and it's more about projecting that brand as the kind of what's leading things. But inside, you start to adopt more and more sort of normal processes, which is where I think LDI is unique, because as we grow, we continue to grow, but only in this idea that this is an extension of Leonie Dawson as a brand. This is an extension of your work and your relationships and the person that that you are and that you're continuing to grow into, and the company is reflecting that at those stages. And so as we get bigger, we take on some of those aspects of other companies and other ways of doing business, but we also maintain some of that uniqueness, and it's really important that we do. And so we're looking at some things right now that we're trying to figure out, like how do we go to a multi-currency capability, and how do we do multi-currency. But I mean, obviously there's all kinds of platforms we could just do multi-currency, but we need a lot of flexibility because we need to be able to do it in the ways that we do business. And so how do we, multi-currency is one of those big problems, right? Like HP has solved that, or any multinational is doing business in all kinds of different countries, and they have all kinds of structures, and there's ways to do that. But we have this business that we've already built that works in certain ways, and we don't want to upset that apple cart to hook into that larger just framework of how you do things. And so how do we do that in a way that meshes those two ideas really seamlessly, and if you're a user, is just benefit? I don't want somebody to say, well, it's great that I can pay now in Australian dollars or pounds or whatever your particular currency is, but in the old days when it was just Leonie and I was paying in US dollars, there was this other experience that I got that I really miss. I liked the way that the delivery was done, or I liked the way it worked, and it doesn't work like that anymore, but now it's in my currency. Well, that's not good enough for us, right? I mean, on one hand, we want the currency piece, but we want to keep the benefits. And so how do we merge those together? And we have that in several places as we try to grow with technology, we try to grow with team. We're growing in different ways, and how do we do that and take advantage of all the great ways that you can do business, but do it in ways that totally maintain our identity and strengthen and deepen our identity, right? I mean, that's the dream of many entrepreneurs. When you're starting out, you're like, man, you got like crappy tools, and you got no revenue to invest, and you got like whatever customers you could find, and you think, man, if only I had better tools, and if only I had better clients and people that would that I was really impacting more, and they would impact me more financially, and we could really get something going here. And yet the risk is that as you get to that point, you just get swept off into the river of, generic mediocrity. We're no worse than anybody else. Or as an old boss I had said, well, we're the best out of 12, and he said, so basically what you're telling me is 12 people are bleeding to death, and you're going to live the longest. And as we grow, we don't want to be that guy, right? I mean, as we grow, we want to hang on to the unique identity and the pieces that have brought us to this point and are what brought people to us, but we also think will bring other people to us. It's how do we grow that market and take advantage of some of these great sort of best in class, best practice ways of doing business and meld those really seamlessly.
It's like, we have a standard operating procedures, like every other fucking company under the sun. And I think that is really, really important in building, a world-class brand, to build standards for your company. And then also making sure that those standards, like how all of your customer service emails get looked after, and how quickly they get looked after, and even down to, we're talking about now when people don't log into the academy, we're talking about setting it up so that we can actually monitor who's not logging in, and then we can send them an email, or we can call them, or we can send them a postcard saying, hey, we miss you. Come, make sure that you're logging in and giving yourself what you need. And how do we use every part of business as a way to deepen and enrich that relationship that we have with our members and our clients, because they're such special souls. And, so many of them have been around for years and years and years. I started blogging 11 years ago. I started in forums probably about 13 years ago. And so many of the people in the academy are people I met on forums 13 years ago. Like, it's these are people that I've known for a really long time, and it's been a really long, beautiful connection. And so I can't do shady shit to friends. Like, that would just be the fucking weirdest thing under the sun. How can we create that friend experience and that beautiful connection across all our members, you know, whether we've got 3 or whether we've got 3,000?
Right, and I think you just touched on it a bit. We use the word standard operating procedures, but what's really critical there is that they are our standard operating procedures.
Mm.
They embody our values. They embody our aims. They're about our business. So they're not just like bolt-on, boilerplate, borrowed. This is actually this is one of our jobs, is to identify how things are supposed to work, and then document that, and then execute that, and then measure and record that that's actually what's happening. And in all of that, that's a standard business process, but the actual content that's going through it is the way we want it done. It's our way of doing it. And that's what gives it identity. And I think, you know, one of the mistakes that people make when they get to a certain size is they just start bolting on all this stuff that they just find. And people will sell you that or give you that, or you can steal it from places or whatever. You know, you're like, well, I just need some things, you know, and they just write this stuff and it's not well written and people don't really know, they don't look at it and they're like, okay, great, I got that taken care of, and they put it on play, and then suddenly they're taking these relationships that are really valued and what their brand is based on, and they're just subjecting them to whatever they manage to beg, borrow, or steal from the market. And you know, how do we, you know, so then it comes to a question of what are our internal skill sets and what are our external skill sets? What has to be part of our internal disciplines? And part of our internal disciplines is one of the reasons that I'm here is because of my background with automation and with web development and with sort of technology in general, helps us inculcate those ideas really deeply in the technical framework, and not sort of be at the you know, sort of at the mercy of contractors or vendors who may not take the time or have the time to understand what we're really about and make sure that the stuff that they're building and giving us actually meets our goals. And so you wind up with this really deep heart for people and serving your community and your tribe and making all this great stuff happen, but you wind up translating that through a group of people who are like, whatever, they said they wanted something that worked and we delivered something that kind of did what they asked for, and we think that got the job done. And there's a bunch of great people working in that space, but just by nature of those relationships, if what's really important to you is delivering a certain kind of experience to people, then you better own the part of delivering that.
Yeah.
You know, we don't need to be a printer. There's no part of the workbook process that we need to be like, you know, agonizing over a press at 2 in the morning. That's not going to make the process better. And frankly, me on a press would be, you know, that'd be worse. But our web technology, where we're building these business processes and automation into code and into processes that are going to run thousands of times, and we want them to do the right thing by people. Man, we need to be looking at that stuff really carefully. That can't be something we just farm out to somebody and hope they bring back right.
And I think that's, well, you know, that's another reason why I hounded you until you lovingly submitted to working for me. It's like, Grant, come work for me. Grant, come work for me. Grant, come work for me. Grant, come work for me, over a 5-month period, because I'm persistent. But
yes,
I kind of
definitely.
Yes. And I recognized in you that you had similar like business values and business goals as me, in that we don't give as much of a fuck about business as we do about making a change in the world, and also doing it in a way that was truly world class. Like, how do we build a truly brilliant business organization that fulfills our highest spiritual longings to help and heal and serve the world as well. And knowing that my energy is limited in some aspects because of parenting and because my particular body makeup, then I knew that bringing you in would help me be able to expand that energy so I could keep on doing the things that I really, really loved. And also, you know, so I could be doing the sale while you be fixing the floor beneath it. So that was really, you know, it was a really nice kind of partnership to run accidentally into and go, oh, hey, let's just put our boats together and like we can go further.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that is maybe one of the most fundamental differences between this business and others that I've been a part of is just really that commitment to a real exchange, right? I mean, I think a lot of people want to make money, they want to do something that they enjoy, they want to, yeah, they want to get along. I think that what I saw here and what attracted me to being a part of this team is that commitment to doing something world class, to doing something that's awesome. And you know, in some places we're there, and in some places we have miles to go. And I think we have aspirations just about everywhere to, you know, to improve things. And you know, that's a challenge of that sort of optimistic, idealistic personality. Is, you know, there's you know, you can go over every hill and there's something on the other side. And so, you know, I don't know how you judge when we're there, and maybe that's part of it. Is I don't know that you get there. I think you always keep thinking up new ways to impact people and to create experiences that are profound. And you know, it used to be that people did that through verbal storytelling of 10 people sitting in front of them that they had come to their village that night, you know, and now we do it digitally. We tell stories and we call out stories, you know, through all these lights and wires and technology. But the ultimate exchange, when somebody at the other end gets it and they light up and they have an opportunity to, in their local world, go be a change agent, that they say to their family, you know, this is who I want to be, and this is the work that I have to do to get there, and this is what it's going to mean when I'm there, and that they say to their market, this is what I see people really need, and this happens to be who I am. You know, because what was awesome about those 10 people in the storyteller was who needed who. I mean, the storyteller had stories, and the people had a desire for knowledge and for entertainment and for something beyond their own boundaries. And here had come this guy stumbling into their village from something beyond where they were, and the opportunity was genuine. You know, that supper and, you know, a little bit of sewing help and some water and, you know, some directions to the next town were part of the exchange that was in, you know, but on the other hand, like, what a great evening. And so for us, as people light up and they find that piece, that they say to their tribe, hey, you know, I'm actually a storyteller and you look like people that need a story. We get an opportunity through all these wires and all this crazy code and all these mechanisms. That's still the exchange. We've just extended it a few thousand miles.
That's very true. And I think too, I like using the grounds of my business to work on my own shit as well. You know, I genuinely get excited when I make a mistake. I mean, obviously I don't enjoy it. Like, I don't, you know, it was part of me that just goes, shit, like, fuck. But then I'm also very grateful for it as well, because it means wherever, as Jerry Seinfeld says, wherever there is pain, it's just knowledge running in to fill a gap. And
I love that.
I just really love that philosophy. I think Jerry Seinfeld, you wise motherfucker, like, that is so beautiful and true. Wherever you make a mistake, it's just something that you haven't had an awareness of before. And so I love growing in awareness, and I love reality too. I got so excited when me and Grant had our first fight. I was like, yeah, this is where the real grit is, because it's fine to have, like, you know, a la-di-da, like, have a wonderful time kind of friendship. But what do you do when you have your first disagreement? Do you use it as an opportunity to go closer and go deeper and open out your wounds and learn how to communicate better. Because I've always been shocking in those areas, you know, like not shocking, but my greatest instinct would be to just burn the bridge and run, you know, if there was any problems. But creating connections where you commit to staying there and sorting through the muck and coming out the other side with more clarity and more commitment, and I think that strengthens connections and strengthens your connection to yourself and your own wisdom as well. It's exciting and excruciating to go through, like all things, but it's the best thing to do, I think.
Well, and I think it depends on how you approach and how you know, in any relationship, how do you both approach places of challenge. And if you have an orientation that says, I want to grow and I want to learn, and I know that the only way to do that is to experience both being tested in my limits and my boundaries and sort of being pushed, and then figuring out what it takes to surmount that, and you're willing to grant each other some space to do that, I think that it is an amazing opportunity. And yeah, I mean, this has certainly been, this is a very interesting opportunity for me, and there have been some places that it's really pushed. It's pushed some great buttons. It's pushed some buttons of pleasure and some buttons of pain. You know, and hey, we all come with a story. We all come with baggage, and it's not that unfamiliar, I think, for any of us that are used to deep connections and to sort of being interested in working with other people closely, that, you know, you sort of also find out that's really where your stuff pops up, and you know, you have a choice there. Are you gonna sort that out and move forward and, you know, kind of transfer that optimism from just potential to actually doing the work, or is it just going to be like, well, that was going to be real nice, but it turned out that person was real, and they made me behave in a way that were real, and now we have to sort that out. And I mean, I'm grateful. I think that there's been some great growth on my part, and you know, I can't speak for you, but I mean, I might be inaccurate, but you know, on my own side, I would say there's definitely been some growth, and I see some opportunities. And so, like, how good is it that you can get good work to do, you can put bread on your table, and you can lay out a self-development curriculum that's going to last twice the length of the years that you're going to you know, actually inhabit, you know, this body. You know, like, what a great opportunity.
Well, I think it's been awesome, and I think the blessing of you know, what the connection that we've developed is that I trust you enough for this to be a training ground for our shit to come out, and I think, and that's kind of what I want to deepen, you know, all of my connections and friendships into. You know, me and Chris have been butting heads for a very long time and learning lovingly through those those arguments. But you know, how can I turn up to be vulnerable enough to speak what's coming through me and share boundaries, because I've been woeful at sharing boundaries in the past, and not share boundaries in a aggressive manner. Because that's definitely been something that I've done in the past, because I was so, like, triggered that I could lash out with my boundaries. How can I actually contain that here and be more gentle with myself during that process, and be more gentle with the other person as well? So I'm very grateful to you for, like, being able to hold the space enough to enter in those painful conversations. It's like, it's fucking cool. Like, how cool is it that we get to learn these big, beautiful spiritual lessons, even in business?
Well, and I think it's a little bit like I tell my kids, you know, who are, well, the one who's married at this point, you can but hope you chose the right boat. But the you know, the other two are you know, just sort of like, around choosing friends and how you know, do you want people around you who you don't see those kinds of opportunities present in? You know, do you want people in your life or your business or you know, in your personal circle that you say, this is a person who pushes my buttons, but there's never any space to work on it? Or this is a person who pushes my buttons, but you know, I can't tell them, and they wouldn't at all want to know. And if they did know, if I let them know, they would go back there and just just break the button. Yeah, like, is this exactly the spot that you were telling me about? You know, so at some level, you know, you'd say just like move away from those people, right? I mean, I tell my daughter, like, don't, you know, if a guy doesn't seem like he's something special, keep moving. You know, like don't invest in relationships where you're not going to get that kind of space to at least grow, to at least, you know, and you know, there's coyote teachers, but how do you actually make real teachers? You know, how do you actually get in relationships that will really help you? And business is great because business is like sailing, right? You know, I'm not really into sailing, but I've spent a little bit of time, and it's not hard to see that the combination of water and wind and the craft and all of the things that go into it, you know, you can see why people who race together as a team either work really well, or, you know, you find a different team to race with. You know, you don't want to be going across the ocean around the world with somebody who doesn't do things in a way that you can work with and that doesn't offer you space to work it out. And business is totally like that. And my experience in a lot of places has been that all those issues are still present, right? I mean, we'd be lying to say they aren't. I mean, whether it's civil service or, you know, for-profit or a non-profit or whatever, right? I mean, I've seen dysfunction in well, once I found it in me, turned out I've been able to suss it out in lots of places, including other people, most of my bosses and coworkers and all that. I think the difference here is that we do talk about that, and we keep that a little more present. And you know, you can sort of dive into that as an issue, as opposed to just saying like, you know, that doesn't work for me. You know, don't do it. You know, it's more like, well, okay, well, how do we? Something about that triggered me. Let's go into that a little bit. You know, what is the piece of it? And there's some curiosity there that I think in most environments just doesn't even exist.
And you know, our running joke is, you know, it's kind of like you walk into a room and you trip over all these fucking tapes on the ground. You're like, who left that there? Like, who's got their childhood tapes on the ground? You know, like, I wasn't expecting that. Okay, all right. Shall we talk about this? It's a little bit of therapy, and I think therapy is good. Like, I think getting open and vulnerable and going, you know what, this part here in business locks me up because of this thing that's happening here. And the more that I have awareness.
It's contextualized therapy.
Yes.
So one of the problems with therapy is, like, you go in this little room with some other weird person that I swear has to be dysfunctional. God bless them for wanting to put up with all that. I mean, who would want that? You have to be crazy, right? It's just like a crazy dating service. You're just like, I would like to meet all the crazy people in the world. And there they come, like, into your little room, and you just sit in this little room, and you're like, okay, I have this problem. And they're like, well, tell me about it, you know? And you dictate the whole situation to them. And not that I would ever lie to a therapist, but, you know, you might color things a little bit. And here it's like, okay, well, we're just going to do, like, you know, it's basically like CPR. Like, it's the therapy version of CPR on each other at times, right? And just have to say, like, okay, what is the deal here? And there's no opportunity to, it's just like whatever 2 or 3 or however many people are present agree to what the deal is. There's no opportunity to frame it for the therapist. There's no opportunity to sort of say, like, well, you know, I think the reason that happened. It's like, well, no, you better get there and figure it out. And so it's contextualized in a way that I think is really cool, because otherwise you just wind up with this thing and you come back and you're like, how can I apply what I have learned to my work? And here you're like, oh my gosh, like, hey, do you remember a week ago when I hadn't managed to eject that tape yet? Like, how cool is it that I applied that new learning to that problem? It's
really?
just instant feedback.
Really. Plus, I think we don't always see who we are and what we're doing. And, you know, I think we're pretty gentle on each other, but we do go, oh, hey, that bit that you do right there, what's up with that gammon, you know? Like, no. So calling each other on each other's shit and going, oh, Yeah, you're right. And, you know, kind of rewinding a little bit and working out a different process to go through and healing whatever little thing comes up through there. It's really useful, and it's useful to get that kind of feedback when it pops up in work situations.
Well, and to be clear, you could choose not to have that.
Totally.
I mean, maybe you're the kind of person that's so healthy that you just want a dysfunction meter at the door. And if somebody, like, if the thing goes off, you're just like, I'm sorry, you can't work here. You know, like that was one light. I don't allow one light. You know, like, it's just like the freaking TSA. You know, you just bring people through this scanner, and if the thing goes off, you're just like, I'm sorry. Or you're just like, I don't want to go that deep. I'm not comfortable with my own stuff and my own baggage and where I've been, and I don't want to put that into some sort of a thing. But here's the reality. The beauty of dysfunction is even if you deny it, it still is controlling your life. So, you know, you could be like, I am not going to deal with dysfunction. Oh, yes, you are. You're dealing with it right now. Yeah. You are, in fact. You know that.
By not dealing with dysfunction and refusing to allow anybody into your building that has any kind of dysfunction, that's a dysfunction. That right there.
Right, exactly. You're the definition of dysfunction. So, you know, in those places, like, you know, there's. So I think the thing here is there's an honesty that that I really appreciate. One of the things from you that I really appreciate is sort of like no shame. You know, that there's not a there's no shame as long as you figure out what the hell's wrong and fix it. You know, like there's not a, you know, and there's also not, you know, I don't think we don't have a lot of tolerance for it over time if it's not identified and clarified. You know, it gets frustrating fast. Twice. Maybe. Twice. 1.5. 1 3/4. It's like where you go off the diving board and you know it's going to be a belly flop and you manage to kind of pull it around a little bit. That can be your second time. Yeah. You know, if you're like, you better look like you're struggling in the air. You know, like you're like, oh, I did it again, but before I land, I'm going to try to get in a better position. You know, but I think that honesty gives a lot of room to you know, to say, hey, there's no shame. There's just bring it to the surface, and let's figure out what it is, and let's figure out what we need to do to work on it. Because here's the thing: who are you going to get to work for you that's not broken?
It's true.
You know, and what you create then is in a corporate world, you create an environment that's so structured and so depersonalized that all you've done is managed to just wall off the dysfunction. And so the dysfunction shows up in power plays, and it shows up in all this sort of under-the-table stuff and all of these ways that people talk about people behind their back. The dysfunction is very present in the environment. It's just all pretty on the front.
Yeah. I was also thinking, like, you know how, like, in marriage, so for people, to give people context, both me and Grant are married to our high school sweethearts. Grant's got a couple more years on me on that. And I would term both of us as being of the inclination to be in for lifer, you know, for lifer marriages. You know, we are both with our spousals, you know, have a lot of conversations separately, not together, because we're not some kind of weird foursome. I cannot.
Plus, if you did that remotely, that would just be really weird.
Really awkward. So, Grant, his beautiful wife on this side, me and Chris in our own little world over here, you know, have conversations about how to have a marriage that lasts until you're 80, where you have good arguments and where you take on the gift of learning another person's perspective and, you know, committing to unconditional love in a way. And I mean, of course you have boundaries and all that sort of stuff, but how can you fully, truly support and appreciate somebody for who they are, even in all of their humanness? And I was thinking, you know, how stunning it would be to take a similar mindset into all of the other, you know, connections that you have, all of the friendships and the relationships you have in your life, going, you know what is it going to take for us to be mates at the age of 80 and to have done it gracefully, supportively, honestly with love, so that we can all grow as much as possible. And so I think about that, how to, obviously, Grant has a beautiful analogy about the relationship pyramid. Obviously you yourself and your commitment to spirit is the top, and then marriage, and then children, and then your relationships under that. But how can you treat your friendships and your relationships as a marriage in its own way, to turn up and to commit to loving your friends and having hard conversations with your friends? Like, is that possible? Is that doable? I'm really excited by that idea.
Well, and I think some of those conversations and some of that work takes two. And it could be that you just have lame friends. And so they won't show up, and so then that'll be difficult. But the place that I think it is really applicable is to say, what marriage teaches us is that we always have a part. I mean, the number of fights that, Jenny and I or you and Chris have had where one of you was 100% wrong and one of you was 100% right. Like, maybe over a piece of knowledge, like somebody really didn't see something or know something or whatever. But if it is really like about the relationship, it's almost always that there's somebody push somebody's button and both things are running at the same time. And so I think that's true in all relationships. Like, there's always your part. And when we turn away from those relationships and we don't own the part of our own doing in making things difficult or making things untenable or whatever, we've missed out on the opportunity, in the same way that in marriage, and sometimes relationships at all levels have to separate, whether it's there's parents and kids that can't sit in the same room, or spouses that don't work anymore, and that stuff is it's usually lots of factors. But so long as you can stay in the same room and continue to work on things and continue to own your part of it, there's a lot of growing and a lot of opportunity that can come out of that. Because once again, there's some dysfunction or some baggage that we all carry, and if our standard is just that we don't let people through the scanner, then there's really eventually what you find out is, like, everybody lied when they went through the scanner. You're just like, you actually were wearing like a lead shield, and so the thing didn't pick up on your dysfunction, and so you just eventually have to throw everybody out. And you hear people, you hear their stories, and they talk about how everybody that they've ever worked for or worked with or whatever has ripped them off or cheated them or whatever, and you're just like, clearly you're not listening to the feedback that's coming from these relationships. You're cutting them off and moving on instead of finding ways to grow through that together.
And I think it's a really fair point as well to communicate that. Can you have, for life, marriages and friendships and relationships with everyone? Fuck no. Whoa. Fuck no. Like, let's just put that out there. Fuck no. We're talking about two people who are working on their own shit and willing to be open and do not intentionally cause harm to self or others. That's I think they're really important precepts.
But that's not a bad qualifier, once again, for a lot of relationships in your life, right? I mean, who do you want to be around that's not working on their own shit and that's not committed to not hurting you or them? Once again, like, your patience or your capacity to kind of hang in there may be different with somebody who is a little bit more on the fringe, however you define that, of your circle, but ultimately, like, you're still looking for the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing. I love our capacity as humans and as spiritual beings to actually grow and to actually see that the pain and the challenges that we've had can be transformed into beauty is amazing. And so I love to see people around me who have that same perspective and are working with things in that same way. And I, frankly, watching people hurt themselves and hurt other people out of an ignorance of how broken they are and missing out on the opportunity to turn that into beauty is something that I don't have a lot of patience for under any circumstance.
I've noticed that on your Facebook.
I have opinions occasionally.
I love it, and I think it's very exciting when people have opinions. I love opinions, because obviously I have none of my own.
Right, totally. You're opinion free almost.
I
need to channel some of that energy into more productive means of change. Though I'm not sure that being at loggerheads with people is actually effective in making them see the world the way that I do, and that's really what it comes down to. That needs to happen. So,
and this is a nice segue, because I think we've talked about lifestyle, beards, but we haven't really talked about art. And I'm always saying to Grant, why don't you just take all your frustration about race and politics and what are the other things that you're shitty about? Sorry, they're American things, so I don't have quite.
Well, I think they're largely universal.
Okay, but you know, why don't you write more songs about them? Because Grant's a singer-songwriter. He's got his own album out. You can listen to him on Spotify. Grant Andrew, Deep Root Life. And so I think it's more useful, and this is definitely just my perspective, if you are in pain about something or you want to see something change, make art about it. And whether that's writing or whether that's songs or whether that's making a fucking podcast, create something with that. And that has so much more healing power and transformational capacity than arguing on Facebook. Though I love arguing on Facebook.
I think we are. I think we argue on Facebook because we're astounded. Facebook gives us access to parts of each other that we typically, in a lot of cases, simply wouldn't have, right? It's like a view into the mind, because what you like or what you share in a second, you haven't filtered it through all the hundreds of people that are going to look at it and whether or not they agree with it or not. If you're in a room, you look around and you say, well, can I tell a certain joke or can I say a certain thing? You look around the room and you say, oh, there's Grandma Betty in the corner. I probably don't want to, embarrass myself in front of her. And so you sort of pull your punches, whoever you are. I don't care, there's most people have some sort of, and in Facebook it's like the web plus, it already has anonymity, but here it's like that sort of coupled with just like almost a dare, like how far can I push it? And so we argue because we're just astounded that people who we know in some other context can actually be this frustratingly different and solid in that position. And you just think, like, literally, like, if I had, like, a second with you and I could just say, like, two things, surely you can't be that entrenched in that position. And the reality is we're both thinking the same thing. We're both like, if I could just lay this out here a little clearer, you would have to get it. Maybe there's, like, a historical detail you missed, a couple hundred years or something, that you just blotted out of your mouth. I can understand that. Like, let me fill it in for you. You'll be like, oh, yeah, right. I forgot about the 1800s in the United States. I'm good now. Turns out, doesn't really work that way. So yes, art is a much more revealing. You can sort of say your piece, and at the same time, I think it's a lot more elegant. It's elegant like dancing is to fist fighting. It's. Even if people disagree with art, they have to wrestle with it. A fist fight, you just walk away. You're just like, I don't want to get hit in the eye again. I'm going to leave.
Yeah. You know what I was listening to? James Taylor. Obviously, James Taylor. His song.
James Taylor.
It's we know James Taylor because we've listened to his work and we love the James Taylor. Well, I didn't realize that's why I'm here. Do you know which one I'm talking about? That's why I'm here. Anyway, part of it is because he was friends with John Belushi, and both him and John Belushi were drug addicts at the same time. And John Belushi ended up saying to him, I'm actually concerned that you're going to OD. And I think you need to start pulling up. And then John Belushi died from a drug overdose. And then when you listen to the actual lyrics, they fucking break you apart, man. Like, I have no idea why I even need to talk about this, but it was a new discovery over the weekend that it was about John Belushi. And so I don't know.
I think that idea turned into a piece of art has a power, and it has a power. So it has a lot of power to you now that you know the personal side of it, but it still had power before just because of the art. That feeling, that emotion was turned into something that was able to be connected with and explain a part of the human experience that made you take notice.
And the lyrics, like, oh God, I didn't even know that so the lyrics are, John's gone, found dead. He dies high, he's brown bread. Later said to have drowned in his bed. After the laughter, the wave of the dread, it hits us like a ton of lead. Like, this is an IOU, I reckon I'll owe you one now. That's why I'm here, got no other reason. That's why I'm standing before you. That's why I'm here. For some reason, that just fucking breaks me apart. I'm just like, for him to have realized that he, through that excruciating experience, he's been like, it's been decreed that he needs to still be there. It's like, that's huge. To still be singing his song and still turn up and write his lyrics, and that's why he's here. Like, that's beautiful. That, to me, that's why we all need to make art. That's why we should all go listen to James Taylor's That's Why I'm Here. Fucking James Taylor. Fucking love James Taylor. If I ever get to see James Taylor live, I will literally cream my pants. I'm just so, I get teary thinking about it.
You might get that chance.
Maybe. He doesn't seem to tour that much in Australia. I'll have to come over to the US.
It's a long way. I mean, I can understand that.
He's getting old.
It's just like, he could play a song or two, and instead he has to fly to Australia. I mean, it's a very practical guy. He's a folk singer. He's not, he's not highfalutin. He's a normal dude. He's like, hey, that's like a day out of my life. The whole daytime thing. He can't figure out like which day he loses. He's like, what do I do?
What do I do when I go home?
You know what? It's too hard. Forget it. Just tell him no. Go on YouTube.
Go on YouTube. So I should say, from a boundaries perspective, that it is Grant's bedtime, and I did coerce him into doing this podcast on the proviso that it was going to be a really short one, and he said, all right, as long as it's 15 minutes. I feel like we've just hit over the 15 minutes now, so totally. In order to
totally. Yeah, I'm with you. You're so good. It's fine. We're well within the, we're at 15, 17. It's great. It's good.
Yeah, I want to be
hour and 17. I don't
even know. It's a long way in. So let's round up life, soul, art, and business with Leonie Dawson, and sometimes Grant Andrews.
Like today.
Like today. Exactly. And we will probably continue this at some other point, and that will be super fun. All right, everybody, have a great, bloody awesome day, and we'll talk to you all again soon. Bye.